This is where the fun begins.
Are you sure? So be it. Did you miss me?
Hello, and welcome to Talking EU. It's been a long time since I had an interview, and I'm so happy to have this program that I have going on, whether it's once a month or we take a small break. And I'm so excited to be here. Human technical difficulties, that's all I'm going to say. And so I'm so glad, thanks to Soul Assassin for introducing me to Words of Paradise, our Leon. And our crossing paths has brought him in to be a candidate for Talking EU. So hello, Leon, how are you doing?
Good fans don't watch Disney Star Wars.
Yes, hello. Yes, I am here and getting some 80s hair metal hair going. Hold on a second.
Right, you're just banging it out. No.
There we go. Much better. And you got my co-pilot Hondo Onaka here with me, and we're ready to talk some Star Wars, some golden age good Star Wars.
Right, that's what this is all about, is George Lucas era of Star Wars here and what got you in. So tell me a little bit about you.
Name's Leon, just turned 29 years old, and I've been a nerd effectively my entire life. And not the cool, hey, let's go to Hot Topic and buy pop figures sort of nerd. This is in the dark ages when you got beat up for being a nerd, and your sixth grade teacher finds you after seventh period stuffed into a locker when corporations didn't just shell out to people like us, wanting us as customers. The dark ages of being a nerd. So it's definitely crazy to see how times have changed, and obviously when I run a YouTube channel myself, Words of Paradise, mostly about how nerd culture and pop culture falls into that political lens, because we wouldn't have imagined, nerd culture being political 20 years ago. I mean, yeah, you had a little bit of stuff like, music and Dungeons and Dragons, Satanic Panic, the Columbine being blamed on video games, but in general, it wasn't near as prevalent as today. So I figured I've got to talk about it. And Disney Star Wars was kind of at the epicenter for a lot of the political discussion. So I had to bring it up on my channel, and now here we are.
Yeah. And then it's funny how growing up, it wasn't hip or trendy to be a nerd and like all the stuff and wear your t-shirts of your favorite franchises and movies and stuff usually. And now it's trendy. Now it's a trendy time to do it. And within that trend, we are seeing the destruction of not only Star Wars, but other franchises as well, with the culture today, like this pop culture direction that people are choosing to go. Hollywood is choosing to go. So with that being said,
exactly correct.
Right. And with that being said, this is why my channel exists, is I wanted to bring something here for people to come onto and watch and discuss and and be in the heart of Star Wars. So George Lucas era. Everything before the buyout is where the heart of Star Wars is. It's no longer in the Star Wars today because George Lucas is not involved. And people don't seem to associate that once the heart is gone, there's no substance. It's like a dead corpse. And we're not here to, discuss the politics of Star Wars at all. We are here to discuss Leon and what got him into Star Wars and all of that. And I'm going to go ahead and just see people in the chat real quick, and we'll get on with the questions here. So I have Matt G here with all his little emojis going on. I don't like StreamYards where you can't see exactly what's going on with these emojis. And then Soul Assassin.
Looking at it on YouTube, it seems like a dude wearing headphones waving hi a bunch of times. So yeah, massive auditory hello to you as well.
Exactly. And then Soul Assassin, who is the one that introduced me to your channel. So thank you so much. He's my
Yeah,
moderator
thank you,
here.
thank you, Soul Assassin. Yeah, that is super awesome. I definitely appreciate you both.
And then, of course, what made me realize that I was like, "What is Soul Assassin talking about?" We are in deep discussion already, and he's like, "Oh, she's running on Kelly time," and I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, I looked and I realized that it wasn't live. I thought we went live. So, human technical difficulties, something to give you guys a laugh. I have not done that in a very, very long time.
Yeah,
So we all
she needs a protocol droid to run the back end stuff for her. It would make life so much easier.
right, just send them in and take care of that, or at least R2D2 or something. You know,
Right.
he'd be more fun to interact with.
He's such a sassy little guy too.
Yeah, he
You
is.
eventually end up firing him for some sort of work related HR things. He says something he shouldn't say.
Right. Yeah. No, he wouldn't get fired on my end because he'd be very entertaining. So, and then Rodimus Prime, a channel member here. Hello there, and thank you guys again. And if you are joining us, thank you so much. Like, share out the chat that we are live, and also if you want to further support the channel, become a channel member here. And then Mr. Dystopian, how are you doing? Burb. I'm pretty sure you meant to say bird, but bird. Aw. How and this is just a question about the bird, but how long does he sit on your shoulder before he gets restless? Like, is
Uh,
he good at it?
yeah, it really depends. Like right now, he's super comfortable. He could chill. I've had him chill for entire 3 hour streams, doing nothing but hanging out on my shoulder. Sometimes within 15 minutes, he starts squawking, and I've got to throw him out the room because I don't want the mic picking up just constant tweets.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he seems pretty chill right now.
Twitter may be gone, but I am surrounded by tweets at all times.
Yeah, I need to put an X on him, right? And Soul Assassin says Hot Topic was cool before the pop times when they had good metal shirts and goth chicks buy Nightmare Before Christmas junk.
That is so true. I love Nightmare Before Christmas. I kind of blame the goths for ruining that movie, but it's okay. We still love you, goth girls.
Yeah. And then of course follow me on Twitter where you'll see like my Twitter outside of my community page on Twitter, you will see me go full force on some things and some topics and stuff like that. So I have a lot to say. And I like to question people, which piss people off. People don't like
Yeah, I
being
saw
questioned.
some ridiculous someone retweeted you throwing a fit about, you being Native American and not liking Disney Star Wars. And I didn't understand I was like, I don't get how that correlates whatsoever to aliens and a galaxy far, far away. But yeah, Twitter, man, it's a place.
Yeah, because the Disney Star Wars basically, made Tusken Raiders like Native Americans, I guess, because when that was going on and people were saying, "Oh yeah, they're like Native Americans," blah 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 blah, with the settlers, blah blah, they were correlating with that kind of thing. And I was like, they don't represent any of us. They just have similar themes, but their purpose and the settlers' purpose are completely different.
Yeah,
So,
no, I heard that was in Book of Boba Fett, but I didn't watch Book of Boba Fett due to the fact that I have something most nerds don't have called self-respect. So
yeah, it's odd that people have to feel like that representation, they have to have representation in everything that they watch, which is funny because you're gonna, like Star Wars, it's not about the human race. The human race doesn't consist like it does here on Earth. There's no other races. They are correlated with planets.
I mean, Palpatine was a bit of a speciesist, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are different races, but humans alone in Star Wars, basically, they didn't have races. They were
Right. Yeah, they were all
associated
just
with
human. Yeah, humans didn't look at each other and be like Kyle Katarn didn't look at insert black character here and be weird about them. They were just all humans. And then there was
Right.
Chist, and there were yeah.
And then we have Batu here. How are you doing? Hey, gang. All right. So, with that, who got you into Star Wars?
I credit mostly two people for doing it. One more like I've been told she did it because I was so young. I was 2 years old, and according to my granny, I would always hide behind the couch while they were, because her, my grandfather, my aunt, who all lived together, they loved Star Wars, and I would stay with them for long periods of time when I was like small child. And according to them, I was scared of Darth Vader, but I would still peek out behind the couch and keep watching it. And according to them, I've been watching Star Wars since I was like 2 years old, and I've always loved it. But my earliest memories are around 3 to 4 of my my dad showing me, I have very early memories of sitting on his lap and watching A New Hope, and of him like when the Attack of the Clones script leaked online, which I think to this day it was a very like possibly a real script. Sometimes stuff like that's fake, but it was very close to the movie we ended up getting with a few key differences. And even though I was technically probably too old to be having bedtime stories read to me, I was somewhere between 8 and 10. He would still spend a few minutes a night reading me pages from this script, getting us all jazzed for Attack of the Clones. And so it was so I definitely credit my dad with being like the real reason I'm such a huge Star Wars fan. And he's sort of a casual nerd. He's far more like normal white picket fans. But of course, anyone who grew up in the 70s loved Star Wars. And so he still to this day loves it, despite him, also having his thoughts about Disney stuff.
Right. And I don't remember quite, but I know like a lot of the movie novels came out before the movies. I know like, Star Wars, basically what is now A New Hope did, and a few other, but I don't remember exactly when they stopped publishing the novels before the movies. I think Attack of the Clone was one of them, that the novel was published before the movie so people could go and read it and then go into the movie, which when you read the novels, you're not going to get exactly everything that you see or read in the novels on screen, because you can't. It's just not going to work that way.
Well, and one of the key changes, the reason I don't think it was a novel, it was a legit script. One of the key changes I remember being different was Jango killed Mace Windu, not vice versa. Like the vast majority of everything in the script was what we saw in the movie. But that was one key difference that stuck out, was they had Jango Fett killing Mace Windu, which I think was done in one of the earlier drafts.
Yeah, and that's crazy how that happens, especially back then when the internet wasn't as open and as prevalent as it is now. And
right. My dad worked in IT, so he knew the internet far better than most people in that era.
I could just imagine. He's like, guess what I got?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it came down. Yeah. He comes down from the upstairs office, and he's all jazzed and excited. He knows that I'm going to be excited for it. It was like Christmas, man.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. So how do you remember how Star Wars made you feel when you first watched it, and what was your first movie?
So I don't know if my first movie was either Empire or A New Hope, because I mean, by the time I was around 2 or 3 when I was first watching them, so obviously the entire original trilogy was out, and my grandparents had them on VHS, so they were just watching them pretty frequently. I have very early memories of both those films. I have very early memories of all 3, but it was definitely either A New Hope or Empire was my first. But I don't know which. I was so young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Usually that's how it happens, and this is my story. A lot of people here, and they're probably everybody who's here who has heard me.
I'd love to hear yours. Go for it.
So mine is basically when it came out. So I'm an OT child, so I'm an OT child. So when I was born the same year Star Wars came out, so that's I'm telling my age.
No, there's no way. I've seen you in person. You look like you're my age.
Sorry.
Native Americans got great genes.
Well, I'm also Filipino too, so.
So is my stepmom.
And so when Empire Strikes Back came out, my family was my aunt. I was raised by my grandmother, my aunt, and a bunch of women. Mind you, a house full of women, bunch of nerds, love Star Trek, Star Wars, all of that. Even later on, X-Files, all of that. And
X-Files. Sorry, go on.
Like speaking of, and so my aunt was planning on us taking us to the drive-in theater, which I wish they had. Like back in the day, that was predominant. That was one of the best things to go to, is the drive-in theater, because you packed everybody in, you had your picnic food, all of that. And so
growing up, because where I grew up was out in the country, we lived about 20 minutes from a drive-in. So dude, that's where we spent every summer for like a solid 7-8 years. It was the drive-in always had double features, and it was say that again.
I said you get 2 or 3 features in one. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was $5 a person, and you got 2 movies. It was awesome.
Yes, and you got to take your own food and all that stuff. So yeah, so you pile up in the car, and so what happened was, before we went, my aunt went and bought the VHS Star Wars, basically now New Hope, and so we watched that first. So my first experience with Star Wars was at home through VHS, which was amazing. And then we went to watch Empire Strikes Back in the theater. I was sad that they didn't, and she was kind of upset too that they didn't, have both A New Hope and Empire's back to back. But it was the movies coming out during the time.
Right.
And yeah, so those were mine. So amazing. We got to watch it at home. Then, with the first one, the second one, we went into the theater and, or not in the theater, but the drive in theater. And that's my first time ever watching Star Wars is through home and then at the drive in. So, yeah.
That is amazing. That's a memory that I would cherish forever. Jeez, that's awesome.
And just imagine, like they say today, oh, Star Wars, it was never made for girls or women or whatever. And here in my household, mainly it was mostly women, and we were watching all that.
My granny and my aunt were the ones that, like, again, my earliest memory is my dad showing me. But before that, if my auntie and grandpa aren't live, which they got no reason to, it was them showing me. My aunt is one of the biggest cinephiles I've met in real life. And she has been a massive Star Wars fan since it came out. She, like you, she calls it Star Wars, not A New Hope, because that's what it was to her. It was just Star Wars.
Mhm.
Same with my granny. And so,
Yeah.
it's amazing the narrative that Star Wars was never for girls, because I know the only girl I know in my life that didn't like Star Wars was my mom. And my mom didn't like anything with a shred of violence and also did a lot of drugs. So, her opinion not super valid. Like,
Yeah, you're like, never mind. And so from the movies you watched, like your very first ones are one, who was your favorite movie character within, like, probably Empire? We'll just say Empire Strikes Back, since that's the one you keep falling to. That was the first one.
From the OT, for as long as I can remember, it's always been Han Solo. It's always been Han Solo.
Yeah, I find a lot of people do, but then when it comes to the women crowd, it's a mixed bag between her or him and Luke Skywalker. So what really resonated?
I mean,
with
women
you?
don't love Lando. That man is so smooth.
Yes, he was smooth too. So it was probably a hard pick for a lot of female fans because there were so many phenomenal characters, and of course you can't forget about Leia either. But strong female lead, right?
Exactly. I mean, for people, I don't know. For a lot of people, I love my comfort movies are the OT. Whenever I'm feeling sick or just not having a good, I pop on the OT. And
Mhm.
Leia's such a mad shit talker. Like, if
Right.
it was modern day real life, she would have like her own YouTube channel and she would just talk mad trash. It would be amazing to see that, because she does, dude. She opens her character arc talking smack to Grand Moff Tarkin, which everyone looks back now like Darth Vader's the big bad, but in A New Hope in Star Wars, no, Tarkin was the main bad guy, and she's just like, she does not care. She is speaking mad ill to him, and it is glorious to see.
Yeah, yeah. And so what resonated with you towards Han Solo? So what really got you into him?
So he had this sort of, I can remember the line, specifically the line was, "Great kid, don't get cocky." Just how dismissive he was of Luke,
Yeah.
of, the one that the young boy like me is supposed to probably align
Mhm.
with, the one that I'm supposed to like identify with. No, you got this sort of kind of older, sort of, not quite a bad guy, but more morally gray. And, the man, Luke does something great. He shoots down a TIE fighter, and Han is basically, yeah, big whoop. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love it. Because I don't know if I'd ever seen somebody that wasn't a villain be so dismissive towards the main hero at that point in my life. I mean, I've been like 4 years old, and I had to ask my dad what cocky meant. I didn't understand. I didn't get what cocky meant, but I knew that he was being derogatory to Luke. And so that was it.
I guess imagine, what does cocky mean?
Yeah, well, because at first I'm not gonna say it. Anyway. Yes.
That's hilarious. Yeah. And question: Mary, FR Freeze, and Carbonite, Mara Jade, Darth Talon, or Jaina Solo?
Oh yeah, this is super easy. So obviously Darth Talon. She's a Twi'lek. There's no getting. Plus she's a Sith. There's gonna be some obvious like shenanigans.
But I value my life.
With Darth Talon. I'm gonna marry Mara Jade. I love Mara Jade. She is arguably my favorite female character in all of Star Wars, besides Ahsoka, because I know I'm a dirty Ahsoka fan. But when it comes to like the EU, the Star Wars that really matters, I would say Mara Jade is probably my favorite female. And I got nothing against Jaina Solo. I think she's got an awesome character arc, awesome story, being trained by Boba Fett. Like, the chick is great, but she's no Mara when it comes to marriage, and Darth Talon's the obvious bedroom choice. So gonna have to freeze and carbonite Jaina Solo.
Damn, just like her father.
Yeah, like exactly, like father like daughter.
Like father like daughter, like father like daughter, or something like that.
Yep.
Wow. So yeah. And then of course, you guys please like and share the stream out. And then of course, Mr. Colt 45 himself.
Amen.
Yeah. And then Mr. Dystopian says, I got into Star Wars through the video games, mainly Dark Forces, Jedi Power Battles, and Shadows of the Empire.
Hold that thought, Mr. Dystopian, because Shadows of the Empire is my single favorite Star Wars game ever. That was also how I got into a lot of the EU. So there's going to be some talks about Shadows of the Empire later. I can almost guarantee it.
Yeah. And talking about Leia right here, Vinny says, really mad. It comes out British. That's amazing. That's amazing. So, oh my God. So, yeah, I was going to ask you what your favorite game is. I have that lined up in my questions, but you already said Shadows of the Empire. So, let's go ahead and expand on that a little bit more. So, what made it your favorite game?
So at the time, I didn't have. So my mother was pretty anti video games growing up, and eventually she would slowly relent. Cause my parents were divorced, and so I would go to my dad's on the weekends. I'd play a lot of video games, including a lot of Star Wars games. And she at some point just realized, hey, there's no putting the kibosh on it anymore. Video games are just going to end up being a part of everyday life. And my first Star Wars video game to play at my mother's house, where I mostly resided, was the Star Wars game Episode 1 Racer, which was a pod racing game, and it was awesome. But then my uncle unfortunately passed away, and he had a Nintendo 64, and one of the games he had was Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. And at that point, I don't think I'd ever played a traditional OT era Star Wars game. They were all prequel games, like Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, like Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which was my second favorite game. So when I got my hands on Shadows of the Empire, and I'm playing like, oh, who's this Dash Rendar guy? Oh, you're able to run around. You're not using a lightsaber. You're running around with blasters. You're fighting the Empire. You've got all these different weapon choices. It opened my eyes to it was one of the. It might be my earliest exposure to what I didn't know at the time was, considered the EU in the form of video games. There's only one other piece of EU material that probably predates me playing Shadows of the Empire.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's I always like to talk about the games, all of that and stuff. But we're going to go back and stir back into the movie part of the franchise, the film, because we know that Star Wars, people may have misconception. Star Wars is not a movie franchise. Star Wars is a multimedia franchise. The first item that ever came out in Star Wars was Star Wars novelization. So that was the first thing before the movie. It came out before the movie. So that was people's first exposure. Now, did everybody get it and read it? Probably not, because at that time, George was making a huge, huge gamble with the type of film and being an independent person, I guess, because he was like, I don't want to be involved with, Hollywood. He took his company out of Hollywood so that he can do what he wanted to do with his films. And so that's...
And what something else he did that was really impressive is that he did not expect Star Wars to blow up like it did. So the toy line wasn't ready. So he would put out these put out these cutouts, these coupon cutouts where, if you bought certain product and paid a certain amount, you send the coupon cutout in, and they would send you the toys later. They all they had were the stands for the toys to sit on. So they'd send you the stand, and then once the toys were released, and there was originally, I think it was 8 figures. It was, I think, Luke, Han, Leia, R2, C-3PO, Vader, Chewie, and that might have been it. So it might have been 7. Or no, and Old Ben. So yeah, 8. And they would send you the toys later. Like, this was months after the movie came out because they didn't expect it to be the phenomenon it was.
Yeah, exactly. And Soul Assassin is being sassy, of course, Mr. Vato here. Shadows is great, but real OGs played Racer.
Racer was incredible. So much better than that awful sequel.
Right. And then, so staying within the movie time frame right now, what is your favorite PT movie and why?
Return of the Jedi. Prequel trilogy. PT. I'm sorry, prequel trilogy. Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith. Yes, Phantom Menace is actually a lot closer than I think a lot of people give it credit for, but I can't stand Attack of the Clones. I think Attack of the Clones is not just the worst Star Wars movie, but just as a movie fan in general, I think Attack of the Clones is genuinely just a bad movie. I don't think that about the rest of the prequel trilogy, though. It gets far more hate than it deserves.
Now I bet the chat is going back and forth now with this. Sorry, Soul Assassin. X-Wing coming in, and then Star Wars.
And Zax, how you doing? I see Zax in the chat. What up, bud?
Yes, I was getting to his too. What's up, OG? What's up, Leon chat? Hello. And of course, Leo, Zach's here. Welcome to the channel as well. And that's amazing, or not amazing, but that's very interesting that you know, the Phantom Menace is closer to what you like in the PT than Attack of the Clones, knowing that, you know, you like you know, Jango Fett.
Yeah, Django is one of my all-time favorite characters, but I hate the
Yeah.
movie he comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your impression, since we're talking about the movies at this moment, what was your impression with Attack of Clones and seeing Jango Fett being used as the template for the clones?
I love that. Like when I remember I was probably 8 or so years old when that movie came out, 8 or 9, somewhere around there. Saw it in the theaters, and like seeing young Boba was so cool. It's like, oh, he's actually a clone. Boba Fett's been a clone this whole time. Like, I'm sure there were probably a lot of like old school fans who actually saw the original trilogy in theaters on like VHS, like me, that probably weren't fans of that. I'm not sure. I thought it was so cool. It was a plot twist that 8 or 9-year-old me didn't see coming. Seeing how the clones, like even at 8 or 9, you watch the clones and you know they eventually become the stormtroopers. And so knowing that these guys would eventually be the bad guys was eye-opening. So I loved that aspect of it when I was a kid. I still love that aspect of it. My gripes with the movie as a movie are completely different than what they were when I was 9 years old. Okay. But so yeah, I loved seeing Jango Fett and I had this thing where I defended him to somebody that, like, oh, Jango Fett's a bad guy. I would be like on the playground at recess, be like, no, he's a bounty hunter. He goes where the money is. That doesn't make him a bad guy when, you know.
It's just a job. But when you get
Right.
into Django's like lore, and this is going to go a little bit into the EU, you find out how complex this guy is and who he really is, because bounty hunter doesn't make a person's culture or identity. It's just a profession. But he was a Mandalorian, you know, and that's
Foundling dude that thinks to Jaster Muriel. I mean, such a great story when he finds young Jango on, I think it's like they crash land on his family's farm, his homestead or something, if I remember right, when the Mandalorian Civil War is going on, and he takes him in. It's a like Jango's upbringing into the Mandalorian clan is such a great story.
Right. Yeah. And we'll get into that some more. So now you already kind of told on yourself. So we're going to the OT. So Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, so you did too. I don't feel as bad. Yeah, Return of the Jedi from the OT for sure.
My two favorites, top two, is Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith. Those are my two most favorites.
Yes.
They switch places, but Return of the Jedi is my number one favorite in the movie part of Star Wars.
Absolute same. It will always be I challenge anyone. Well, I mean, I guess Disney's the one who can do it now, but before the Disney, I would challenge anyone to make a Star Wars film and it eclipse Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It just can't be done.
Yeah. Hello, Fook Norris. How you doing? How are you doing? So with Return of the Jedi, what made it your favorites?
The green lightsaber.
The green lightsaber.
I was a kid. I was like 3 or 4 years old, man. I saw a green lightsaber. My favorite color was green. I was all in, baby.
I never expected that. You're like, green lightsaber. I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
What? What?
Green lightsaber and Ewoks. I mean, that's it.
Oh,
like,
wow. Yeah. And you said, you know, I can't wait to talk about Ewoks. And I mentioned, I sent Leon the Talking EU interview with Matt Wilkins. I'm surprised you never heard of him.
Yeah, I hadn't. I couldn't either. He was so interesting to listen to.
And Matt Wilkins does have his own channel. He's kind of like the grandfather, I guess you can say. Poor Matt Wilkins is going to be like, Laura, what the hell? But of preserving the EU. So like once the buyout happened, he knew that they were going to go ahead and toss the EU and go their own different direction. And stuff.
I'm going to toss I'm still listening. I'm going to toss the bird out here. He's getting a bit, so yeah, but continue.
And so from there, you know, he helped lead a campaign about, you know, preserving the expanding universe or whatever. And they put up billboards and stuff like that near the headquarters there near San Francisco and all that. So, but he basically knows his stuff. Of course, we can't remember everything all the time. He's read through and reviewed every single novel, short story, what have you, and he's doing a reread right now.
Man, I thought that I had read a lot, but hearing his story and the amount, he was picking out certain authors from Clone Wars era, from modern. I was like, man, I can't go that hard. And I thought I was good on the EU. Like, I was beyond impressed. He has probably forgotten more about the EU than I will ever learn, and he was such an impressive individual.
Yes, and so like I recommend go check out his channel and stuff like that. Very awesome guy, very amazing. He helped preserve my interest until because I did my channel was basically about my native dancing, and then what turned that direction in my channel to a Star Wars channel is of course The Last Jedi. I was like, I'm done. I need to preserve and help preserve the original lore. So I'm going to take my direction and start sharing and talking about and doing compare and contrast, which I do have a video coming up later today. Compare and contrast Luke's New Jedi Order versus Luke's Order from the Disney Star Wars. So that should be very.
You've been building up to that on Twitter too. You were just now you would throw some like the last few days. You've been throwing occasional shade at Luke's New Jedi Order. So it's cool to know that that's being done for a video because I've been enjoying those tweets.
Oh yeah, and then so my conclusion, I'm writing it. I got all my visuals lined up, almost all of them there. Got to do a couple of video clips to add in there and do the voiceover, and bam. So hopefully by tonight it'll be up. I was hoping by last night it would have been, but never happened. So
Well, I also like that you said that, when The Last Jedi came out, that was when you're like, all right, I need to start preserving this. Because that's when it hit me as well. Like, Force Awakens was fine. I didn't love it when it came out, but I thought it could at least springboard into something that I still will really enjoy. Rogue One came out, and despite it bastardizing the EU for what it was, because at this point, we all knew the EU was gone. So I was like, okay, if the EU is gone, I'm going to have to accept that. So here is their version of it. I liked their version of it. And then... yeah, then Last Jedi came out, and I couldn't believe that I hated a Star Wars movie. I went through like 3 months of denial before I finally admitted, nah, Star Wars is it's something. It's happened. I don't like something Star Wars related. And I was already on the fence about the previous two, but now it was done. So that's the movie that killed it for me as well.
Yeah, and then what initially first killed it for me was the announcement that the EU was not going to be valid anymore.
Right.
But I was still curious to see what was going to happen. Like, okay, they're going to go their own direction. Let's see. Maybe they will go 120 or 100, 200 years after Return of the Jedi, past Legacy era, and give us something kind of different, and stuff like that. But I knew from then on that, stuff was going to go down. I wouldn't have imagined it being as it is today, though. So that's one thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
To answer Rodimus Prime's question, yes and no. Is it worse than the Disney trilogy? From a technical script writing and filmmaking level, yes. I hate admitting that. I hate admitting that something Lucas did was worse than the Disney trilogy. But yes, it is. Now, will I watch Attack of the Clones before I will ever touch something Disney trilogy? Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I will always go back to Attack of the Clones first. But if I have to be objective, then yes, Attack of the Clones is technically worse than the 3 Disney movies.
Yeah. Wow, that's an interesting take. Some people are like, because I will just say this. Okay, so George Lucas, we know that he had some groundbreaking technology and stuff with the films, like the film industry. Like he opened a lot of doors for what we see today. And with his vision and with working with the right people, what have you. And so, like I'm not saying I gave him a pass for his CGI and stuff like that, which was at the time you didn't know it was too much or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't have any qualms. I still don't have qualms with the CGI. I mean, it is what it is. I can look back on it like, okay, it doesn't quite hold up, but yeah, no, I think the CGI is the least of the prequel trilogy's problems.
Yeah, and so there's that debate that goes back and forth, like, oh well, the CGI he did too much, but people don't realize like every single movie, maybe with the exception of Revenge of the Sith, because they had to do CGI because there's no way they were going to have them fight by lava and stuff like that. But majority of the PT, with the exception of Revenge of the Sith, had a lot of like, what do you call it? And I just had it on the tip of my tongue, where they had figures and stuff, and I can't think of the friggin' name now.
Miniatures.
Yeah, where they did practical.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is more. There's a lot of, and more than practical effects. What the prequel trilogy shines at is the choreography, and not just for lightsaber fights. Like the choreography of the prequel trilogy. Maybe it's I'm a stage play nerd. Like I grew up taking theater and whatnot. I've been in plenty of plays. The way people move in the prequel trilogy is very akin to watching a live stage performance. So I actually love a lot of the physical direction. It's more how there's some writing issues. There's some absolute baffling, writing decisions in terms of you could probably cut 30 minutes out of Attack of the Clones and it be a good movie. You could change 2 or 3 character decisions and it be a much better movie. It mostly just it comes down to runtime and a very poor use of editing.
Yeah, and what I'll say with this, because people accuse me of like putting George on a pedestal, which I do not. He does say things where he contradicts himself, and his company has to go and correct what he said. That's prevalent, and I've shared that evidence as well. But he with his scripts and stuff like that, every single filmmaker is going to have their best and their worst, even in a trilogy. They're always going to have their best and their worst. And that's a learning pivotal point for them, and sometimes an idea doesn't exactly hit either, or doesn't come out, but still it's like the better of maybe the one that he decided to try to change it to. So we don't know, but like I said, I always recommend the Star Wars Archives episodes 1 through 3 and episodes 4 through 6. So if you ever have a chance to get and add that to your collection, the Star Wars Archives gives a breakdown of what George was thinking, doing, along with those who worked with him and stuff. Great interview, great resource to have when it's getting into George's mind and head about what he's doing with what he did with those movies and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, because I'm right there with you. Like George at the end of the day is still just a man. Man is fallible, and the fact of the matter is, he made 6 movies, 5 of them being phenomenal. Like, yeah, I will call Phantom Menace. I love the Phantom Menace. I will call that movie phenomenal. If you miss 1 out of 6 movies, you're doing pretty a-okay. So like, there's putting George on a pedestal, and there's just acknowledging that the dude is really good at what he does. But much like anyone, he is going to have some faults, and there are definitely some faults that you could still be a fan and acknowledge that. Now, Disney, when you compare that to Disney, there is absolute, cognitive dissonance in Disney fans that only that lap it up because of their nostalgia for Disney. They saw The Lion King in 1994, thought it was the greatest movie ever, and now Disney is just they can do no wrong. I think that legitimate Star Wars fans can acknowledge when things aren't good, whether it be a book, whether it be a video game, whether it be a movie. There's plenty of EU books that suck. Like I love the EU. Let's not pretend they're all good. No, there's so many shitty.
Oh yeah, there's some that are like, what was that? I read your book here in this installment, but what happened here? With some of the authors and stuff like that. So that's with any creative. They're always going to have their best and their worst. And thank you, Alex, for dropping in. Another channel member coming in. Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on here. What got you into the expanded universe?
I will show you.
Okay.
I did not know it was the expanded universe at the time. I was young, but it was this right here.
Oh, okay. So this
is an actual animation cell from the show. This is a real animation cell that was used in production of the Star Wars Ewoks cartoon. It is my most prized Star Wars possession.
Yeah, and that George is the one that was the head friend of that as well, the Ewok.
Yep.
And so that is that what made you really into the Ewoks? Is that cartoon?
That cartoon? Yeah, my dad, the one that got me into Star Wars. I don't know if you guys had these in California or whatnot, but back in the day, there used to be a video rental place called Hastings.
I don't remember.
Say it again.
I said I don't remember. I used to just go to my aunt used to get the games for us and stuff, and we would tell her what we want and if it was there or not and stuff like that. Yeah. So she handled all that for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Hastings was great. You could go in, you could rent movies and video, obviously rent video games, which we never really did as a kid, but children, it was either free or really cheap, whatever. Now my father, like I said, got me into Star Wars. I love this man. He has done so many great things for me. But bless his heart, he cannot return a movie on time to save his goddamn life. And so, and this is around, like these places are starting to go out of business. Blockbuster was coming in, taking over. So he let me rent a Star Wars Ewoks VHS tape. I'd never seen it before. And I said, I hadn't even started kindergarten yet.
Mhm.
And we're renting this movie. And it's like 3 weeks overdue at this point. And Hastings goes out of business. So I just now owned that Star Wars Ewoks VHS tape with like 4 episodes on it. And I watched it over and over. Finally, when years later, was able to actually watch the entire series. But I just adored the Star Wars Ewok VHS tape that I had that had like 4 episodes of the show on it.
Wow. Okay. You're the first, I think, that has told me that that was your first experience. Usually it's a game. I find it like, on average, it's a game. And then, or it's the Thrawn trilogy, which I think that's everybody's way in, is the Thrawn trilogy. I have like stunned people with saying that the Thrawn trilogy is overrated.
No, the Thrawn trilogy is some of the greatest Star Wars material ever written. But no, I can't trust anyone who says it's overrated. But anyone who wants to talk about, oh, I don't like Ewoks. Ewoks are for children. You didn't grow up watching the Ewoks cartoon, and you had a shitty childhood.
Yeah. Yeah, and Melissa Laura says Caravan of Courage was steady on TV back in the 80s.
I didn't see that until only the last few years. I had never seen Caravan of Courage until relatively recently in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And it's Ewoks, so I love it. Like, I know it's bad, but I love it.
Yeah. So with that, so that was your first like way into the EU and stuff. What was your first book, and what was your first book?
Do comics count? Because I read a lot more comics than I did Star Wars novelizations.
Well, I'm going to
early
get
in
to
life.
that. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. So it doesn't matter when you started reading the novel. What was your first novel?
Okay, my first novel was probably. I know it was an Old Republic novel, but I don't know what the name of it was. It was it was around the same time. It wasn't the Darth Bane trilogy, because I read that and I loved it, but it was set in a similar time frame, and it but I don't know what it was, because I was in probably 3rd or 4th grade at the time. They were young adult books, or not young adult, but like adolescent books, and or maybe it was some of the Jedi Quest books, actually, which would have been prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
Either way, there was this big period of time when the prequels were coming out, where they were putting out a bunch of like 5th to 6th grade age Star Wars material, and it would have been that. I read those a lot.
Okay, so basically the PT era material and stuff, like what you can get at book clubs and stuff like that as well.
Yeah,
probably. Okay. Now with the comics, what was your first comic that you read? Like
it was the comic adaptation of Heir to the Empire. I didn't read the novelization until later, but it was the comic book adaptation of Heir to the Empire.
Wow. Okay.
Or the Jango Fett origin story, whichever one came out first. They were around the same time, but I read both those comics around the same time. So
yeah, and those in the chat for those 2 questions, you can answer them too. What was your first novel and your first comic, and then your first game? Of course, Shadows. Was it Shadows?
Shadows was the first one for the EU was, because I don't know if you consider the pod racing game part of the EU. It's more just a racing game with the Star Wars motif or aesthetics. So yeah, it would probably be Shadows of the Empire, or that because that came out well before Bounty Hunter. So yeah, Shadows of the Empire.
Okay. And so I'm going to go back around, do round robin with this again. So what was your favorite book or book series?
Like when I was young, or nowadays?
It doesn't matter. Like now, it could be now, because sometimes they change. Like me, I can switch characters who are my favorite characters, like depending on what I'm watching, reading, revisiting, and stuff like that. So if you had to go back and just sit down and pick up a book and read, what is your favorite one you would pick up and read? Like, what is the one?
The one. It's okay, that's super easy. Death Troopers.
Okay. Death Troopers. Yeah. I hear it. Like, I get a mixed review on that. I love it. We did a review on that because I used to do literature review, and then I halted it because the people couldn't stay committed on reading and coming on and reviewing the book. So, but that was one of them. We did that around Halloween time in October, like 2 years ago, I believe. And so that was a mixed bag awesome. for people. So what?
Yeah, I can see it being a mixed bag for people, but I'm obsessed with zombie stuff in general. Like the only tattoo I have is a Resident Evil tattoo, and it's literally what if Resident Evil happened to Star Wars, and I was hooked.
Yeah, yeah. And so, besides the zombies, what else that caught your eye with that? What made you very intrigued about it besides the zombies?
I do care about spoilers. I imagine probably not. I
No,
imagine the chat probably doesn't care
Who
about
cares
spoilers.
now? People should have read this shit already.
Fair enough. I was first time reading this. I thought it was going to be a completely separate side story that would be,
Mhm.
yeah, you could read it and find it enjoyable, but there'd be no sort of connection to the films or characters we knew about. So when you're about halfway through the book and Han Solo and Chewbacca show up,
Yeah.
I didn't see it coming and my mind was blown. So now not only do we see, the Star Wars universe infested with zombies, we get to see how Han Solo would survive a zombie apocalypse in space. It was just
Mhm.
mind blowing.
Yeah, he had the plot armor because he couldn't die.
Yeah. Yes.
So how would he survive?
I mean, he obviously survives because he's the MacGyver of the Star Wars universe. Just put him in a situation and he will find a way to live, unless, of course, he's confronted by his son in a terribly written movie.
Yeah, and we won't go there. We just won't go there. We won't spoil the mood.
Right.
Here. So with the comics, what is your favorite comic or comic series?
My favorite comic series is real. The chat's asking if I'm talking about Red Harvest or Death. Red Harvest is the prequel that shows like thousands of years before how that virus, or not really virus, came from a plant, but was concocted by like the old Sith. And I do not like Red Harvest. Just it's fine. It just is not near as good as Death Troopers. Taking place in like 3 BBY or whenever it is 4 BBY. But my favorite comic book series is probably the Jango Fett origin story. Really any of the Jango Fett comics. I mean, not just his origin, but there's been comics that show like how he raised Boba and what he would teach. He would throw Boba in this in a room with just obviously very nasty space aliens and creatures that want to kill him. And he's like, hey, survive. And if you survive, we're gonna go play with your toy spaceships afterwards because I'm a good dad. Like, there's just such this great sort of the parenting aspect of Jango Fett. You could tell he loves his son. He absolutely loves his son, but he knows that he's also in his profession. He's not going to live forever, and he needs to leave behind a son that will be able to make his way in the universe.
Yeah.
So any Jango Fett comic
Stuff.
that actually delves into his character development and him as a father, I love.
Yeah, Blood Ties was a really good one too.
Yes, Blood Ties. Let me make sure is that. Let me Google that and make sure that's the
That's
one.
the Jango one where was it Blood Ties where he helps out one of the clone sons that
Okay, that is the one I was saying. Yeah, the one where and Boba Fett basically questions him on why he lets his target live, and
yeah.
And Jango has to kind of teach him the lesson that there will occasionally be things in life that are more important than your profession. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we get the introduction of Boba Fett and having a wife and dealing with the circumstances of what happened to the wife and what have you, and why he's by himself now. So, great arc between the two because it went from Jango to Boba. So that was a great little arc there as well. So very fun one. So we already established your favorite game, Shadows of the Empire. So I'm going to play this clip real quick.
All right.
The fate of the galaxy is now in your hands. With the new LEGO Star Wars Slave One.
Prepare yourself for Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire. The evil Empire has struck back with a vengeance, and a new villain, the crime lord Shizor, schemes to replace Darth Vader as the Emperor's second-in-command. With Han Solo held frozen in carbonite by bounty hunter Boba Fett, it's the rebellion's darkest hour. Now, join Jedi warrior Luke Skywalker, hard-charging Chewbacca, and go undercover with heroic pilot Dash Rendar and his booming Outrider. But can Han Solo be freed and Shizor be stopped? Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire. Look for the authentic figures and vehicles from Kenner.
Oh, just hitting me right in the feels right there. Just showed Dash, showed Prince Chizor, just showed. Yeah, I love it. Love every moment of that.
Yes. And Blood Ties, Connor Freeman. Yes, exactly. Boba Fett takes the galaxy. Yeah. So I was like, I knew his last name was Freeman, but I couldn't think of the first name. But I remember Freeman because, of course, the clones, they were basically a slave army, genetic slave army. And
yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Exactly. And so tell me a little bit more about what really got you more about Shadows of the Empire. You can even expand into the multimedia product if you wish.
So yeah, I didn't so growing up, I only knew of it as a game. I didn't know that there were comic book tie-ins. I didn't know that there were Yeah, there was a novelization. I knew there were toys. I had some of the toys. I had the Prince Cheezor toy, which comes with these cool little like blaster shield things that he can hold
Yeah.
and whatnot.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just when I played the game, it introduces you to Dash Rendar, and you fight in the Battle of Hoth, and you get to take down the AT-ATs, and it was just as a game mechanically, I was like, oh man, this is great. I feel like I'm really piloting these starships. I feel like I'm really piloting the Outrider, because this was
Mhm.
still the very early era of 3D video games. Aside from like
Right.
Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario, and maybe a few like 3D fighting games, I hadn't really experienced a whole lot of 3D games yet. So when I played a 3D Star Wars game that made me feel like I was like truly playing in Star Wars, it was monumental. And then it was so rare to get a licensed game, whether it be from Star Wars or anything. It's so rare to get a licensed game where you're not the main hero. You'd expect to be Luke Skywalker. You'd expect to be Han Solo. I mean, not in that particular game. He's in Carbonite, but in general, in Star Wars games. So for them to just drop in this new character that I'd never heard of, and I got invested. Like, who is this guy? I want to learn more about him. He's got this super cool outfit. He rotates through all these weapons. He can kill Wampas. Like, it was... and the Outrider is by far the superior vessel to the Millennium Falcon. I would die on that hill. So yeah, I fell.
How dare you? So
I fell in love with the Outrider as a ship.
yeah, and people are like, oh, he's just a Han Solo 2.0, and his freight is
No, I will debunk that in a heartbeat. Anyone that calls Dash Rendar just a carbon copy, clone of Han Solo, no, he is his own original character. He has his own wants and needs. Like he oh, continue. Sorry, because I'll go on about Dash.
You're like, I will protect that.
I will.
I will defend him and tell people where to sit. Yeah. So with that, when you first seen the special editions and you got to see what George inserted, did you recognize the Outrider? Did you notice it?
When it flies away in the Mos from
Yes.
Mos Eisley, I absolutely, I was to this, like, I semi defend the special editions because in my thought process, like, I've written songs before. I'm a musician. I've written songs when I was like 17, 18 years old, and they're not very good because I'm 17 or 18 years old. Then I'll go back at like 25, 26 and be like, maybe I want to redo this song in a way that I was in my head back then, but I didn't have the skill to do. And I end up making a better song out of it. So like, are the special editions better? In some ways, yes, some ways, no. But as a creative, I can kind of understand what George was going for. He wanted to do this sort of stuff originally, but just didn't have a way to do it. So I get wanting to go back to your old art and kind of recreate what you originally envisioned.
Yeah. And that's, I try to, as an artist myself, I try to give that perspective of like, an artist is never fully done with their art. It's just the time they decide to put it down when they feel like, okay, I am done but not done. So I think
right, you've hit that creative wall. You might never touch it again, or you might be able to add something to it later. It just you never want to force that creativity, because that will only result in a bad product.
Exactly. So there's always, like I said, there's a mixed bag with even the special editions or whatever. So with that being said, who is your favorite expanded universe character and why? I know we've went through a little bit of this, but who and why? And if it's a few, go ahead and just talk about them all.
Yeah, it's Dash and Thrawn. It is easily Dash and Thrawn. Like, because again, Dash, the reasons are they started out, because I was very young, purely aesthetic. You can see this big bulky dude with what looked like just chains of bullets. I later learned they were not, but when you're super young playing that game, look like chains of bullets. He's got an even cooler Millennium Falcon. But then you get into the expanded universe, you learn more about the character, you play through the game, and you see that he's not just a mercenary with a heart of gold like Han Solo is. He's a bit more cutthroat. He's a bit more, just, I'm going to do this for the money. And I don't like Han Solo learns to care about the rebellion. Dash really doesn't. I mean, he sort of does. If you read the EU, a lot of stuff came out later where he, has this, not really romance, but potential romance. And this, I can't remember her name, but basically a hollow star, a pop singer from the Star Wars universe. And like, he has a small attachment to the rebellion because of his attachment to her. But unlike Han, he never really cares. Plus, he he fakes his death at the end, and he doesn't really come back to help the rebels. He's like, nah, I'd rather be remembered as a martyr, but actually not be dead. And there's, when you get into like the Yuzon Vong arc, there's some underground rumblings that maybe he's been sabotaging some Yuzon Vong sympathizers, but he himself never pops back up. He's almost like this ghost of a forgotten era that is still out there doing stuff behind the scenes, but he never got the focal point again, like the mysterious stranger aspect. So yeah, he's a lot more brash, cocky, and not really cold-hearted, but he's more monetarily driven than Han. He knows how to stick to his instincts more so than Han does, and I just adore that in a character, one that is. They are technically a good guy, but they are very, very non-traditional. Like, they're not an anti-hero like someone like Deadpool or whatever. They're very much still a good guy, but it comes with a price, and they're going to stick to whatever code they have, and not the only exception being because you obviously Return of the Jedi has that line, many Bothans died to get us this information, and you find out those Bothans died because of a mistake that Dash made. Dash is such an expert fighter pilot, and he's such an expert really at anything. He's a mercenary, he's a smuggler, he's a bodyguard, he's this jack of all trades and got master of all of them. Then when he does fuck up and get all those bonds, I'm sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear or not.
No, you're fine. I cuss on here all the time.
Okay, but when he does screw up and all those Bothans die, he feels remorseful about it, and that's why the only time I can think of him doing this free of charge offers his services to Luke, basically as a way of make amends. But other than that, he doesn't screw up. He's so good at what he does. He doesn't make mistakes, and he makes sure people don't owe him anything, and he owes anyone nothing. I do it. He's like a bounty hunter, but like Jango Fett, but not bounty hunting. He's like, here's my price, here's my job. Once I do it, I get paid, I go on. And I think that is awesome. We don't get enough of those types of characters because everyone wants ideal characters.
Yeah, I think what distinguishes him between Han is that if you get into Han's backstory, if you read A.C. Crispin's Han Solo trilogy, you find out exactly that what he wants in his life, because we don't know his circumstances, why he ended up orphaned on the streets, right? But because he still has like the sensation and feelings and emotions of having a family, that was something he always wanted himself. And
whereas Dash grew up in a wealthy, well-off family that got ostracized by the Empire. But even when he was in this wealthy, well-off family, he didn't really want that. He didn't want their money. He didn't want to go to the family business. He craved freedom. And me, as somebody who does a lot of like sort of freedom-based, I'm all about free speech. My YouTube channel is all about the freedom to have certain ideas and opinions. Seeing these characters that come from money, but all they want is freedom and adventure. I'm like, yes, I relate. I respect it.
Yeah. And they're like, if you want to say, people say, oh, well, Dash is Han 2.0. They're complete opposites. If you really break down their characters, that we don't really know. It's hinted, it's stated that Han came from the, the royal family of Corellia. But that still, you still get some like unknown if it was really true or not. They left it very vague. But Dash, so Han came off the streets, was rescued by Shrike and used a part of his crime syndicate and stuff like that, and raised in that situation, and was raised by a Wookiee too, which put in the familial, like caring for each other, tribal stuff that Wookiees do and stuff like that. And that's where he knows how to understand Shuriwook. And Dash, on the other hand, is very opposite. They both come from Corellia, but they're very opposite in character and development and their motivations.
Right. Yeah, and I do like the similarities between them, because they are similar enough to where they're easy to compare. I mean, both joined the Imperial Navy real young, and both for different but similar reasons. Both of them were kicked out of. I don't remember if Han Solo was kicked out or just left, but Dash was full on kicked out of the Imperial Navy for something that had nothing to do with him. Like he had. It was his family's drama, and his family was sabotaged at that. But because of that, he was kicked, despite being an ace pilot who would like impress his own instructors. Like, damn, I had no idea how can this cadet do this sort of stuff? But the Empire still kicked him out just because of his brother's mistake. It was as opposed to, like I said, Han Solo. He didn't I could be remembering it correctly, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But he didn't join the Empire out of any sense of like wanting freedom or fighting the good fight. He just wanted stability, which is the opposite of what Dash wanted.
Yeah, and then the reason why he got kicked out was he was against slavery and he saved Chewie. That was their arc.
Chewie, that's right. Yeah, it's like yeah, he was kicked. I couldn't remember if he left or if he was kicked. So yeah, thank you for correcting me on that.
Yeah. So, and I knew you were kind of like, what did he leave for? What happened? But
Yeah.
it's time for, and I'm surprised I didn't do the quiz question already because we're already in an hour, almost an hour into the show here. So people know, if you guys been through my Talking E, you know I like to ask quiz questions here. So the very first one is, what ruling family was Thrawn adopted by?
I know it was the 8th ruling family, but I don't remember their name.
So
but it was
the
the
eighth, and
8th
it's the myth.
family.
It's the myth.
The myth. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. So yeah, so I like to throw out these. If you guys don't know, I like to throw out these, whether they get it or not. It's just for the fun of it. Some people, bam, bam, bam. People are like, oh crap, I don't remember, and that's fine. So yeah, so the 8th ruling family are and then the myth. So, just one question here. Did you like the direction that Zahn decided to take Thrawn in the new lore, like his writing?
Yes. Yes. I feel like that's one of the few. Now, I've not read a whole lot of Disney books because, well, it's Disney. But Timothy Zahn announced he's bringing out a new Thrawn product. Disney or not, I got to check it out. And I did. I read all 3. And the character of Thrawn, at least in my opinion, stayed completely in character. The Chiss as a race felt like, they would have been written. Like that sounds like how the Chiss would have been in the George Lucas era. I feel like Timothy Zahn as a writer still writes as if Lucas was in control. And I do like the Chiss Ascendancy trilogy.
Okay. Yeah, because there's a lot that also was changed. So there was familiarity because of course the writer, the author will usually get characters and all the environment right and stuff that they're writing. That's it. But there's a lot of ways that he changed Thrawn up and all that made him not the same versus how he originally written him from. And so I'm not going to get into it. I did a compare and contrast with that, like a small video on that. I just was curious to see how you felt about that.
No, I'm curious on your opinion, though. So, did you dislike the younger Thrawn in the Ascendancy trilogy? Because if we disagree, that's fine. I'm all for disagreeing. It's cool.
I don't like the direction, like the feel. Like I said, he knows his Chiss, he knows what he set up and stuff. I just don't like the direction he took the Thrawn in the new lore versus how he was setting up in the old and stuff. And I think that this was his chance as an author to say, okay, maybe I didn't like this approach here, so I can redo it.
See, and that's definitely entirely because there's some definite changes. I also wonder how much of it is because by the end of the Thrawn trilogy, the Chiss Ascendancy trilogy, you basically find out that Thrawn isn't a bad guy. He's going to be playing the long haul double agent con for the Empire. He's really all doing this for the Chiss, and that the Chiss know he's going to be they're sending him into exile when really they're sending him in to.
They did change that story because they changed him and that he was a disgrace. He went into exile versus now he's this good guy, and I don't like that approach.
Exactly, and I'm wondering how much of that is did Disney knows that Thrawn is a popular character, and they wouldn't dare have one of the most popular characters truly be a bad guy. Let's say that Reva actually did take off and was a popular character. Disney cannot have like bad guy characters be popular. There always needs to be a redemption. We needed to redeem Reva. We need to redeem Ben Solo. And so I think that Disney is the one that decided to have Thrawn secretly be a good guy. And I agree with you. I don't like that twist. But I don't think that was Zahn. I think that was Disney. But I'm just guessing.
Well, we don't know how the story. We don't know exactly because George, he was the one that approved things. Like these are my rules. This is even if he only reads the plot points of this, he's gonna say yay or nay if it's gonna fit into his ideal of Star Wars and stuff and what he wants and stuff. And then of course those at the head of licensing will also help with them and developing the story and stuff. So comparing that to now, I don't think there's much care in that, but I'm not gonna. We're not here to discuss and go into full of that. So there you go.
Mr. Dystopian called it out, so I was like, I yeah, I know what you're talking about, bud.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So, what were your thoughts on Shadows? Okay, so we already discussed that. So, I do have like a little list to make sure I have all I wanted to talk about. So, Shadows of the Empire, you know, with that, I have one more questions regarding that. So, when did you discover that it was a multimedia project?
So I've been a comic book fan for, I mean, again, since I was old enough to read. I mean, I've been a comic book fan since I was probably in first grade or possibly even earlier. So obviously, I was reading Star Wars comics. I knew that they like connected to the movies. I played video games, like Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter has a direct correlation to Attack of the Clones.
Right.
I never really knew how deep it went. I didn't know that, like, oh, certain things that appear in this comic will tie into this novel, which will be tangentially related to one scene in one movie. Like I didn't know how deep it went. But being a comic book fan where stuff is interspliced all the time, like, oh, what happened in issue 174 of Avengers really affects Amazing Spider-Man issue 323 for one panel. Like, I was already familiar with that concept, so it wasn't jarring. I just didn't know how deep it truly. I didn't know that Star Wars was as expansive as something like Marvel when I was real young.
Yeah, and what's the difference between Star Wars and Marvel? Star Wars was a complete history where Marvel allowed reboots and retellings of stories and stuff.
Right.
I wanted to share this with you because that was one of the things that really not got me into Star Wars, really caught my attention. Luke Skywalker is what got me into Star Wars because I wanted to know what happened after Return of the Jedi. So when this multimedia, there we go, wrong button.
There we are.
I'm just having some technical. I just can't get my act straight today. So this is like,
look at that. Ooh.
So the multimedia project even consisted of its own score for Shadows.
That is good. Yeah, that's good. And I used to know the name of the guy that did the score for Shadows of the Empire. It's
I have it here. It's Joel McNeely.
Thank you. I know it starts with J. Yeah, Joel McNeely. Thank you. Yeah, and he because when you play the Shadows of the Empire game, Dash's theme is in the game for all of one scene. He's the main character of the game, but he's only his own theme song plays for one scene of the whole game, which is. But Joel McNeely, great album.
And fun fact is that George Lucas liked the multimedia project so much that he also considered on making it a movie.
Really? That I did not know.
Yeah.
I live in fear that Disney is going to try to adapt Shadows of the Empire.
I think right now they may not because they already had Leia do her impressionist of the Bossk or whatever. Or what was the bounty hunter disguise she took from? Was it Borsk or whatever his name was?
Are you talking about in Return of the Jedi or?
Yeah.
It's an incredibly difficult Tuscan sounding name. I could not tell you how to pronounce that, but I know the one you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, because I think that was in Shadows of the Empire, the novelization too. I think, but anyways, yeah. So they already retold the story in that era. Oh, Bosch. I was like Bork and all this other stuff. It's Bosch. Thank you.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. See, I was thinking it was like BRURK, like some ridiculously difficult to pronounce. Okay, never mind. Maybe it is just Bosch. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so do you have a favorite era in Star Wars? Like, if you like the Old Republic, if you like the PT era, or the prequel era, or the Dark Times, which is the era between the PT and the OT that leads towards the Return of the Jedi, or do you like the New Republic, the New Jedi Order, or the Legacy? Do you have a favorite?
I genuinely had to, because there's so much good and frankly so much bad in the EU that it's like there are aspects of all the eras that I love. The one that I find myself going back to the most is probably either the OT era or literally just the subsequent stories from Heir to the Empire all the way to the Vong. But
the New Republic
era. But there are some incredible Old Republic stories. There are some incredible Clone Wars era stories. And I guess the one that probably I go to the least might be, because what people consider the Old Republic, it kind of tends to change. Like some people say, oh, the Old Republic is 3,000 years ago. They don't consider the Bane stuff part of traditionally part of the Old Republic. Whereas I do. Like, to me, that's still 1,000 years before the movies. That's still the Old Republic. So I guess it really depends on how far do you consider the Old Republic.
Did you know the Old Republic was from like that 39 or whatever thousand years, all the way to the ending of the Revenge of the Sith. That was all the old Republic until the
See, and
Empire.
that's what I've always considered as well. But
Mhm.
I've been told that everything from Bane onwards is, which
No,
is a thousand years BBY, is not considered Old Republic.
the
So I
prequels,
thought that I could be mistaken.
yeah, the prequels are the tail end of it. Even though they realigned it and called the galaxy, they realigned it and called it the Republic.
The Galactic Republic, right?
Yeah, it's the end of the tail end of the old Republic, and then once Palpatine takes over and makes it the Empire, then we get into that time frame. So, yeah, so just a little bit of history there on that. So, with that being said, do you have a favorite species and why?
Oh, I mean, obviously Ewoks. I've already told you, I love me some Ewoks. Obviously, we love not just Thrawn. I love the Chiss. Like when you read the Chiss novels, you get just
Yeah.
intricate lore on their hierarchies, on their family structures, on their politics. So I love the Chiss. I love. Oh my god, I'm blanking on their name. The Cantina Band species. It starts with a B. It's not Bothans. It's
The
Biff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah. Biffs are great. If I had to pick an absolute favorite, it's going to be Ewoks. It is. I mean, I can't not choose Ewoks.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like Ewoks because that was my first exposure to the EU, basically.
Right.
Yeah, the Biths. Yeah.
Biths, it's not Biffs. Biths. Thank you.
Yeah. The Biths. So yeah. And
Also, the Sith are incredibly cool. Like the actual race of
the race
Sith.
Sith?
Not they're a very cool OG race to delve into lore wise.
Okay. And then who's your favorite Jedi?
There's so many cool Jedi character. It's gonna be really hard to not say Obi-Wan, but it very well might be Obi-Wan. I mean, I love Luke. I love Kyle Katarn.
Mhm.
I love Kit Fisto. Either Obi-Wan or Kit Fisto.
Okay, so Kit Fisto, expand on that one. I'm interested to hear.
So I'm terrified of water. Absolutely, it's one of the few things in my life I'm afraid of is water. But I watched the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars episode way back in the day when it was coming out on Cartoon Network, and I saw Kit Fisto fighting droids underwater, like swimming at supersonic speeds, all shirtless with a lightsaber. I didn't even know lightsabers worked underwater at the time because I was a kid, and it was like to the point you can't see it in frame, but at the very top of that shelf right there, sitting in the center, is a Kit Fisto Black Star Wars Black Series action figure. Like I never considered any because Star Wars doesn't do a lot with water, but aquatic Jedi for someone that's afraid of water, that was so cool to me.
Yeah. Okay. So just seeing something different and a new approach to a species as a Jedi and all that.
And then when he's one of the only ones besides Windu that can at least semi defend himself against Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, he at least gets a couple parries in before he gets killed. So he was clearly skilled.
Yeah. And then Soul Assassin says Kit Fisto hooked up with Ayla Secura Jedi Chad.
Oh yeah, and one of I know that opinions on the Clone Wars, not the Genndy Tartakovsky, but the Clone Wars are very divisive. But Phil LaMarr is a great casting for Kit Fisto. Like Phil LaMarr is a very talented voice actor in general. To have Samurai Jack playing a Jedi is just perfect.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. And so, who is your favorite villain then? So I'm vague.
Aside from Thrawn, I assume.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a Sith or Dark Jedi or whatever. It could be,
I mean, most of my favorite characters have been because I talk about my love for Jango and Thrawn. If you consider Jango a villain, I'd go him. But I mean, if not, it's going to be Darth Bane. I mean, Darth Bane is just that his whole story with the rule of two, the way that he and Xana oh man, and also his obsession with orbalisks and the whole orbalisk armor being introduced into Star Wars, like that was such a
imagine allowing these creatures to exist on your body and coexist, like giving you a little bit more emphasized power and allowing them to coexist on your skin as protection. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Like he might not be my favorite because Thrawn is awesome, but if there's one Star Wars villain I would never want to like exist around in real life, it would be Bane. Like, Thrawn might kill you elegantly and quickly, whereas Bane will just make it agonizing to show that he has dominion over you, and you'd have to look at him the whole time, and I cannot imagine looking at that skin.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
Bane.
And he picked up and learned from Revan's holocron, and from that, he
Yep.
devised the rule of two, which influenced like the story there on forward going into Darth Vader, and we could probably debate that.
Bane is the reason for the OT. Like,
Right. And even Revan, because Revan had those ideas that Bane took off with. And
that's true.
And we're going to be talking about that more on my Calf Chat Thursday morning. But
also, there's a really cool, I don't remember his name, but a really badass Twi'lek Sith that trains Bane that they end up fighting at the very end of the first book. They fight in this. I don't remember his name, but he was also awesome. And the way that he and Bane, like, that, like, I listened to that.
Him,
that
like,
book
you're
on,
weak, you're weak, and stuff like that. He taunted him.
And so, but what was that book sticks out to me because I listened to that one on Audible as well. Like, because I love the Star Wars audiobooks are very well, the higher quality ones are very well done because they give you full on sound effects, they give you musical scores, full voice acting, and that fight scene was so well done audibly. You would hear the clashing of blades while they're taunting each other. When Bane does bring down the citadel that they're fighting in, and, or the spire or whatever, and brings it down on top of him, like there's the shaking and crumbling. There's this musical score. I could visualize it in my head purely based on the audio engineering of the audiobook, and it was so fantastic.
Yeah. All right, so another quiz opportunity here. So are you ready?
Lay it on me.
Okay. How many ruling houses or families govern the Chiss ascendancy?
So like, how many houses are there total? Because there's like 4 top houses that are really in control, but I think there's 12 total.
So yeah, so basically typically 9, but 4
is it 9? Okay.
4 has been a common one for a while, and there has been up to 12.
Okay, guys. Okay, so semi-right. I'll take that.
Yeah, so that one's kind of a mixed bag right there of like any one of those could be right because at one point there's either 4, 9, or 12.
Okay.
At a given time frame history in the Chiss ascendancy. Yeah. So there you go.
All right, I feel like I'm doing pretty decent in these questions. Yeah, right on.
You're like, yeah. And then what is your favorite Thrawn novel or story in the original EU?
It's not the best, but my favorite is Heir to the Empire because that was what got me started with it. Like I had heard about Thrawn through like because I'd read the comics, I'd read the comic book adaptations and whatnot, but the novelization, as great as comics are, they do have to change and condense things because it's a different medium. So when I finally read the novelization of Heir to the Empire, it put Thrawn in a totally, I wouldn't say totally different light for me, but it he was already cool from the comics, but reading him in the, you don't truly get how calm, cool, and collected he is in the comics because all you have are speech bubbles. There's not a lot of ancillary text, as opposed to when you're reading the book. Timothy Zahn will talk about how calmly Thrawn says something. He will linger on how much Thrawn is admiring a piece of art. So I think there was probably Heir to the Empire.
Okay, yeah, that introduction and how the New Republic, the budding New Republic, was in denial. They thought that all the Grand Admirals were gone because
because I mean the New Republic hadn't really been to the far reaches of the galaxy where Thrawn had spent years. I mean, like that's where he spent the vast majority of his entire patrol with the with the Empire. So I mean, people even within the Empire, they didn't know there was really a 9th or 13th, whatever it was Grand Admiral, because there was it was off the books. He was supposed to just be he's a Vice Admiral because that's how little Palpatine trusted Pete. He trusted Thrawn so much, he secretly made him a Grand Admiral while telling everyone he was a Vice Admiral. Like, that is insane.
Yeah. And then when everybody started turning against Thrawn in the story, and we're talking original EU here, you
Mhm.
know,
That assassin dude is, yeah, I don't remember
yeah,
his name, but
those who had quarrels with each other basically used Thrawn as a way to as united and went against Thrawn, which they thought ended up putting him in exile in a bad way. And it was really a cover by Palpatine because he wanted to expand the Empire out. And
well, and also it's alluded to because the Yuuzhan Vong had not been created yet. They just
right.
kept calling
Mhm.
it the greater threat from beyond or something to
Yeah,
that
the
effect.
far
But it's
outsiders.
alluded to that Thrawn and Palpatine knew about the Vong invasion, and that's why I do that. That's one of the few reasons I am okay with the retcon that Thrawn is a good guy, because Thrawn is very aware of maybe not what the Vong are, but that the Vong are out there, and he knows that the only way to defend against them will be a completely united galaxy. So at the end of the day, that is still semi good natured, semi noble. Maybe his methods are his methods might be very um archaic, but sometimes you got to go back to basics when you're dealing with something like the Vong.
And the thing is villains can still eliminate threats that's going to harm their purpose and their mission. And Th- Thrawn in the original EU wasn't looking to unify the galaxy. He wanted to destroy the threat too, and that was the New Republic. So he was still
Right.
acting in accordance to what the Empire was about and all this other stuff, while still, even though he was exiled, like original lore, he was exiled by his own people. It wasn't something that was done in secret. It was like he was basically his rights to the family that he was adopted by was taken away.
Well, yeah, he was no. I mean, he was no longer considered part of not only part of the family, but
But
just
the ascendancy,
his species as a whole.
right?
He is exiled from acknowledging his lineage as a Chiss, as
Right.
period.
Yeah, exactly. So he still was a villain. His motivations and how he acted upon them were very different than the Sith that we know, like
Right.
Sidious and Darth Vader. And so you can have villains with different purposes and different motivations and how they act upon it, but they're still villains. And that's the thing that people don't understand. They want him to be very ambiguous, where he's in this gray area, or he's really a good guy because he wants to save the galaxy from. No, he wants to make sure his people are okay and stuff. However, he wants to rule the galaxy that he's trying to save.
And I could be wrong, but after his exile in the EU, not the new stuff, but even then, he does still care for the Chiss despite them exiling him.
Yeah, exactly. Still, that's his people. That's who he cares about. Even though they chastise him and sent him off on his way, where he was discovered, by the Empire and stuff, and all that. So very interesting story. I think that he has more depth in the original EU than what Ron made him be with this new stuff, because it put more character build. It made more dynamics with him, other than just being the secretly good guy that wants
Right.
everything to be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. Also, and this is just for anyone in the chat that may be video game fans or whatnot. What initially drew me to Thrawn, like why obviously for his own character, I came to love him as his own character, but he reminded me when I was first getting into him as the Star Wars version of Albert Wesker from, if anyone's familiar with Resident Evil. The Albert Wesker character is Thrawn, but for Resident Evil. So it was it's this calm, cool, collected bad guy that is always 2 to 3 steps ahead of the heroes and is completely eloquent. You never you know where Thrawn's allegiances and where both Wesker's allegiances lie, but there's always there's always that chance that they could surprise you. So they're very similar characters. And as someone that grew up playing Resident Evil, because it's my favorite video game franchise of all time, the similarities in them as villains was also something that drew me to Thrawn.
Okay, yeah, and you could see that across platforms and how ideas probably spawn from from different creators and stuff. And
certain archetypes are just very good archetypes.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit more about what fascinated you about Thrawn. So go more into depth with that, since we're on the subject.
So I mean, the key thing that most people take away, like one of the first things the book tries to throw at you, is his obsession with art. And I watch a lot of anime, and you'll see that in a lot of villains. Like that's actually a really common theme in anime, is that villains have a very fine taste, very
Uh-huh.
artistic taste, and because of that, that's why they're a cut above. They got to be the bad guy because having such a refined mentality and refined palate for the finer things in life has led them down this route that where they're just more intelligent, they're more intellectual, they can see further in advance, and so Thrawn follows almost an anime-esque villain character archetype that
Mhm.
if you're a filthy weeb like your boy here, you'll find familiar, but they up the ante to it with Thrawn. So when he can analyze, just a single piece of art and just pretty much completely understand a culture from there on. If you've ever seen an anime where like, oh, he's seen this move once and now and now he can replicate it, and it's supposed to show how genius the whether it be good guy, bad guy, whatever, it's supposed to show how genius they are, that they can now do this awesome, powerful move after only seeing it once. Thrawn can do that by looking at a sculpture or looking at a painting,
Yeah.
and that is that is a different level of intelligence than even like Palpatine was a smart dude. Like there's no denying Palpatine was a smart dude.
Yeah.
But there's a whole nother level when you can look at a statue or a painting and just from there
I
subjugate
get that.
an entire species.
As an artist, I get that because like getting my art degree and growing up with art, like art was like the thing that came so easy. Creating, drawing, painting, all of that, like taking what's in my mind and putting it and translating it on paper and stuff. When I look at art, you could see the person's personality in it. You could see, oh, that art, I could tell their style. This is so and so style. And when you recognize this art pertaining to the person, or with Thrawn, for instance, the species, you can sense, you can see, um, what is used, how what colors are used, how it's sculpted, how it's drawn out, and stuff like that. So I get that, as an artist, I get that you can really.
I'm not an artist, so the fact that you get that's incredibly impressive. Like I'm an
Mhm.
artist in that I can make music, but that's a different
Yeah,
kind of art. Like I
yeah.
get where it comes from. Like I can listen to one band and be like, oh, I bet they were influenced by XYZ, but
Hmm.
I can't do jack of my hands. I can't sculpt. I can't paint. I can't draw. I'm awful at it. So like the fact that you can be on that sort of level and see things in a similar light to Thrawn, like that is incredibly impressive
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, so he takes it and he looks at it and he dissects the personality of the species, or even the individual, on and it goes deeper into that too, which is fascinating to me as an artist, that Zahn did that with Thrawn and used that as one of his strategic brilliance of finding out about people and species and their history through their art, which is very, very interesting, like I said. So
And Thrawn also is one of the few people in the Empire that does actually, I don't know if fear is the right word, but respects the Force. You have a bunch of talking heads like the Grand Moffs that think of the Force as just this archaic magic, whereas
yeah.
Thrawn in the EU, he was part of the Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars as we know them now, because the EU thought the Clone Wars, because those movies hadn't been made yet, so they thought it was gonna be something different. But Thrawn was active in the Clone Wars. Thrawn saw the Force, and so he understands the need for like the Issa Lamari or whatnot. He knows the danger that Luke can pose because of the Force. He knows the danger that Mara Jade can. Now, thankfully, Mara Jade is, at least at the beginning, on his side, but he still understands that there's a danger that needs to be respected in the Force that most of the other Grand Admirals or higher ups in the Empire did not respect, and so
Yeah.
that's very great on Thrawn's part.
Yeah, because they think, oh well, you guys are extinct, and it's clearly stated in the OT, in A New Hope, so they're smirky, like, oh well, the Emperor, our master, basically, or defeated all you guys. They probably never experienced the wrath of maybe, well, until he smacked off of Sidious, or Darth Vader. So they think that Force users are non-existent, so that's the limitation that they had in their minds, whereas Thrawn, he's lived, he's experienced a lot more, he's seen a lot more, so he's going to be like, okay.
He has killed Jedi. By the time of Heir to the Empire, he has killed Jedi.
Right, and he worked for he was the commander of Jarek. Was it Jarek from Dark Empire?
Yes.
Not Dark Empire, but Dark Forces. The Dark Forces?
Jarek is the character, correct? It's
Yeah.
the story arc is the it's the one with that the ship that the Jedi are on in the far reaches of space, and the
No,
Thrawn fires.
I'm talking about when Thrawn came into the Empire, he was the commander, I think, of Jarek's ship. From Dark
Gotcha. You're talking about the Empire guy that pretty much made Thrawn what he is to the Empire.
Yeah. So and he's the one that went up against Kyle Katarn. He was a Dark Empire during that time.
I thought it was Kyle Katarn's dad, Morgan Katarn.
No.
Was it
He's
Kyle?
not. No. Jarek is the dark. Like he's like one of the first Inquisitors ever in Star Wars history, and he's the one that gave Kyle Katarn that medal when he graduated. Well, Thrawn was
that might be. I thought the one that Jarek fought was Morgan Katarn. I thought it was Kyle's father.
No, I'm not talking about fight.
Okay. I'm sorry. I guess I was misunderstood. I'm retarded. Sorry.
You're good. You're good. No, Thrawn was his commander of his ship. So yeah, Thrawn was the commander of Jarek's ship during the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solus says the Chimera. Yeah, the Chimera was Thrawn's ship. I guess it was Jarek's first, and I just am dumb and didn't realize that.
Yeah, so there's a history because, before Thrawn had his own ship and stuff like that, he was, commander. He worked with Jarek, under Jarek. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. My apologies for the misunderstanding.
You're like,
there.
what are you trying to say, Alora? I'm like,
yeah. I was so because the only interactions with Jarek that I could remember was with Morgan. I was like, I thought Kyle was still a child at the time. Like,
no,
I couldn't.
I'm talking about Thrawn, not Kyle. But I'm trying to.
Yeah. You said Kyle, and my mind just went to a completely different.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I said Kyle, I meant Thrawn. But Thrawn is the one that was the commander of Jarek's ship during the time frame during that time.
Okay. So you gave Thrawn the medal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
okay,
then
you said give Kyle the medal, and I was like, I don't.
No. He did. Jarek did give Thrawn the medal, or not Thrawn. He gave Kyle the medal.
Okay, gotcha.
When he graduated.
That's okay. That's something I don't have near as much info on. So yeah, never mind. I'll have to. Yeah, I'll take your word for that one. I don't know if I've got that info.
Yeah, so it's in. I don't know if you have these series. I know you played the games, right?
The Kyle Katarn games, the Jedi Academy games, is that what they were called?
Well, the Dark Forces too. So let's see here.
So I played the only Kyle Katarn game I played was the I think it was called Jedi Academy 2. Is that what it was? Jedi Academy was the first one. I don't remember. Shoot. I have it on Steam. I can just look it up there.
Soul Assassin's mocking me right now. I was like, I know what I was talking about.
Jedi Outcast. That's the game I was thinking of. Jedi Outcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jedi Outcast. Yeah, so Soul Assassin says, "You're lucky, words of paradise. I have to work for her on mod it at the chat during OG's crazy moments." To
be fair, that was equally my fault. That was not her crazy moment. That was a complete misunderstanding on my part. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah. So there's something that you can look into because he did work under, other Jedi. That's my point, or other people with Force users, other than, having, working with, Palpatine and stuff like that. So he has experience. Imagine working under the commander of Jarek's ship during that time, and stuff, and having to deal with a dark side Force user and stuff like that. So I can see him discovering and using Islamary for, to kind of squish the Force away from him so he's not influenced.
Right.
So, all right. So we learn something every time. We learn something new.
Yeah, we do. That was great.
Yeah. So, what do you think about Pelion?
Pelion. I'm going to need a refresher on that character. I'm going to be real.
Pelion, Galad Pelion is the second in command for the Chimera under Thrawn.
Oh, is that the guy that in the novel he instigates the rebellion against Thrawn?
He works for Thrawn.
Well, yeah, but near the end, his followers Thrawn's followers start to turn on him. I was wondering, is Galad Pelion the one that instigates the turncoat?
No. Thrawn has always been loyal to, or Pelion has always been loyal to Thrawn.
Gotcha. Okay. No, I probably don't have many opinions on him. Then I'd have to go back and reread the trilogy because it's been years. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have too much of an opinion on him. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So Pelion basically was the second in command, and he was the one that basically was the protege or to Thrawn. So later on, when you get into, have you read Heir to the Empire, or not Heir to them? Sorry, have you read the Hand of Thrawn duology? Shadows.
No, No,
Yeah.
I've read I read the original Thrawn trilogy, and then read the new read obviously the new Disney trilogy, and then comic books that Thrawn was in. But I haven't read any other novelizations aside from those 6. So
Okay.
unless they adapted Hand of Thrawn, and I didn't know that it was an adaptation, I wouldn't have read it. No.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so the Hand of Thrawn duology is set like what 10 years later from the Thrawn trilogy, and so now Pelion has the Chimera, and he's the one in charge and stuff like that. But he's the one that he is in the Thrawn trilogy, and he is his second in command. So yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll have to check these books out. Yeah, because I did not know. Yeah, I've not read the Hand of Thrawn. But that sounds awesome. Like following up on his, the guy that Thrawn taught everything he knew effectively. That sounds great. And
Yeah, so
also,
I won't get
that's
any
now what
spoilers.
I will picture when I read these books. Thank you.
Yeah, so I won't give any spoilers on that. So yes, so I'm glad that you're like, okay, I'll check that out. And
Yeah, happily. Yeah, I've got like 5 Audible credits. I'll happily check out the Hand of Thrawn trilogy or
yeah,
duology.
Specters of the Past and Visions of the Future, right here. He just typed this out as I was saying it. So so those are the 2 books to look for.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I will.
And then if
make a
you
note of
haven't
that
had a
right
chance
now.
to read Dark Forces, the trilogy, the novella trilogy that I showed you, Dark Forces, that goes with the game, I would check that out as well, because you do have Thrawn in that too. Like I said, because he is the commander of Jarek's ship, our star destroyer.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I will always look forward to new Thrawn stuff, especially stuff that'll probably be better than what we're going to see in Ahsoka. So yeah, thank you.
Right. And then what are your thoughts about the Old Republic? So we're going to go back to that. So let's go
Okay.
back to Bane and Revan and all that. So who would be like, if you, besides Bane, who do you return to for story wise?
This is one of the few instances where I'm probably actually default to a video game, because believe it or not, I'm not a massive gamer. Like I love Star Wars game, I love a few other video game franchises, but I'm far more interested in like books and comics, movies, music, things like that. But I'm gonna default. I mean, the KOTOR games are, I mean, they're undeniably some of the best story that Star Wars ever gave us. It's Revan is an easy thing to say because it's because it's Revan. But I actually like his Jedi name was Alec. What's his name and when he turned Sith? Revan's best friend.
Damn it! How come I'm not remembering this right here?
Why am I only remembering his Jedi name and not his Sith name? That's bothering me.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. Malik. Thank you. Yes, Darth Malik. And the reason I would go to him is because he's kind of a pitiful Jedi. Like Revan was great as both a Jedi and a Sith. He was unparalleled. I mean, at least at the time, as opposed to Malik was a pitiful Jedi. So it kind of really enforces why the dark side is so tempting, because he's one of the greatest dark side Force users, at least of the era. And it just goes to show that the Sith aren't always lying. The dark side does offer immense power to take someone who was a subpar at best Jedi and turn him into one of the most feared Sith in the galaxy. There's a draw there. I can see the seduction of the dark side.
Yeah. Okay. And so your introduction to the Old Republic was the game then?
Yes. Yeah. It was Knights of the Old Republic.
So you never read the Revan book then?
No, I never read the Revan book.
Okay.
No.
All right, because I wanted to get your opinion between the game and the book, because people have like these reactions, because the game, people can, customize their character in a sense, and Revan could be female, blah blah blah. You get so much.
No, I always go with the canon. Like I always make Revan a dude. Like I'll make him maybe alter his look, because to my knowledge, his true look even that's still a mystery. I don't think we've ever seen a canon version of Revan without the mask. But no, I always make sure that he's a dude at least.
Yeah. So people do have their opinions, because they do get to customize and the scenarios and stuff like that, and so sometimes it doesn't line up with the canon book story, and so people do get upset about that as well and stuff. But I just like to get opinions.
The game did come first, right? I could be wrong, because didn't the game come first?
I
I think it
and the
did.
novel came out. Yeah. But
Okay, because there is because the game has multiple endings, but there is a canon ending,
oh
and
yeah,
so
no,
yeah, that's
Drew Carpathian was in development with the story, and he's the one that created the story canon for the game, and then it came out as the book. So there's the
okay,
canon story, and then there's the what if scenarios that people can play,
right.
and that's what George Lucas loved doing with the games. A lot of the games is giving you what if scenarios, so
Yeah,
that
the Revenge of the Sith has a great one, like
Mhm.
where instead of after you beat the game, you can unlock a what if Anakin won scenario, and it's super
Mhm.
cool to see that Anakin kills Obi-Wan, the Emperor comes down and congratulate him. Anakin kills the Emperor, and he does just what he
Mhm.
says to. In the movies, it's like we can make things the way we want them. Anakin does that. He kills the Empire, takes over, and says, "I'm going to make the galaxy the way I want it," and it cuts
Yeah.
to black. And yeah, it's a cool little what if.
Yeah, so like George was very, very big about that, allowing fans to get their what if stories and make their own scenarios, their own stories in some of the games. Not all of the games, but he was very good with that because he wanted that. Like even Forces Unleashed had scenarios too, where they had what ifs and stuff, or you could play a dark side of this character, even though they're light side kind of deal and stuff.
Right.
Very interesting. And yeah, Star Wars, yeah, we were both on the same page. Drew Karpathian, developed a story for both game and the novel. So the canon is what you see in the novel, and it also goes off of what the game says is canon as well. So
Right.
it's very
And
interesting.
that's another thing that because we talk about Star Wars being a multimedia franchise, and
Mhm.
before Disney took over, like I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think there were very many companies that like let's take Marvel for example.
Mhm.
Marvel puts out a Spider-Man game. That game doesn't really fit into the canon of the comics. It's a cool Spider-Man game. Whereas like you take Star Wars Bounty Hunter, no, that entire game is the explanation for why Jango Fett was chosen to be the template for the clones. That was
Yeah.
the canon reason. Now, did Disney axe that from the canon? I assume as such, but until Disney took over, that game was the reason. If you want to find out why did Jango Fett become, the template, it's because the dude killed a dark rogue Jedi at Count
Mhm.
Dooku's behest. Like
Yeah.
that was canon.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I like that they were able to, because at the time video games were not really a respected medium like they are now. They were just seen as time wasters.
Mhm.
Honestly, like a lot of movies are and whatnot. So for Lucasfilm to go all in and say no, these games are just as important as the books, just as important as the comics, just as important
Yeah.
as the films themselves. That was kind of unheard of at the time.
Yeah. And then let's go into now. We went back all the way to the old Republic. Let's get back into the new Republic now. Do you have a favorite X-wing pilot and why, or who is it and why?
I do not have a favorite X-wing pilot, and the reason for that,
Okay.
I don't care about the flying, whether it be the movies, the video games, books. I don't care about flying segments at all. I know there are people aside from, I think the Outrider is an amazing ship. I love Dash and I love the Outrider. But other than that, I've never found the sky battles or anything interesting. It's not why I buy the tickets to Star Wars. It's not why I play most of the Star Wars games that include flying levels. I'm not a fan of, and maybe
Okay.
it's just because I've never had an interest in, like, I'll get on a plane to go somewhere if I have to. I'm not like afraid of flying. I don't get what, so like scientifically it's amazing. Hey, you're able to take a plane, fly across an ocean. Yeah, humans, that's super cool, but in fiction, it's just maybe I'm just desensitized to it. I've seen it so many times since a kid, but when you watch stuff as a kid, what interests you is usually what you stick with. And what was interesting to
Mhm.
me was the different planets, the different species, the lightsaber battles, seeing the actual character. And I never grew any attachment to the vessels, or the people would fly in. And
Mhm.
that's not just Star Wars. Like if I was reading a book like Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, I don't give a fuck about the ship, the Black Pearl. I care about Jack Sparrow as a character, but I don't give a damn about the ship.
Okay, so you probably were never savvy into. I use the word savvy. Haha. So you were never savvy about like the X-wing games and stuff. Then.
Yeah, no, I mean, I played the Rogue Squadron games just because I had them. I like got them for my birthday or whatever, and obviously I would never want to be dismissive of a video of a gift or whatnot. So I would play them just because I didn't want to be rude. But yeah, the Rogue Squadron games or the flying games were never really my thing. And yeah, stay on target, stay on
Stay
target.
on target.
Um,
Stay on
my,
target.
my dad actually wrote that in the birthday card I got a couple, because my birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and that was my dad wrote that in the card.
Hmm. Damn, all Liam has to say is episode 6 is his favorite Star Wars movie, and our Star Wars takes would be.
I did. I said at the beginning. Yeah, yeah. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, bar none.
Yep, LW, you missed that. So that is also don't care for the pilot stuff, but recognize its importance to the IP. Yeah, not like you're one of the minorities that is not into like the X-wing and stuff, because X-wing series is one of the most popular series in Star Wars, like the X-wing series with um and Wedge Antilles is he gets a lot of his.
He's a great character. Yeah, he's a great. I just don't care about him as a pilot. I like him as a character.
Yeah, so he gets most of his character development in the EU. So that's where we see him take off. That's where we get he's fully fleshed out, is in there and stuff. So so I was going to ask you what your favorite vehicle is. It probably we probably already know that already then, but what is your favorite Star Wars vehicle?
I mean, again, obviously I have an incredibly biased love for the Outrider, but if that aside, the land speeder, Luke's land speeder.
Okay.
It's purely just because it was one of the earliest Star Wars toys I remember getting, and being able to like set my little action figures in the land speeder toy and drive it, because it had wheels on the bottom, so it looked, but they were real tiny, so it looked like it was levitating, and being able to imagination got to run wild as a kid when playing with my Star Wars toys. So I love Luke's land speeder, and the Slave One is fucking iconic.
Yeah, Slave One too. So you have the iconic ships, but you're just not into the starfighters.
Yeah, exactly.
So we know
when I'm reading Star Wars, like one of my favorite novels is Maul Lockdown, and okay. I like Darth Maul. Everyone likes Darth Maul, but really the reason for that, that's a very character driven novel. Mm-hmm. Like you take someone like Darth Maul, who you think and you say, all right, now what happens when he has to go by a fake name? He has none of his weapons and cannot use the Force, and you put him in a maximum security prison. Mm-hmm. Now you're going to learn what the character actually is. That to me is far more impressive than like anything that happens in a dogfight in space.
Okay. So you like more of the Force aspect and stuff like that, and the one on I get what you're saying here.
My favorite book series of all time is Dune. Has been for years. There's also not a whole lot, like obviously in Dune they fly in spaceships, and Dune heavily inspired Star Wars. So there's not a lot of like space dogfighting. There's no space dogfighting. There's ships, but there's no like space dogfighting. So I already being a big Dune fan, I'm more interested in like the boots on the ground stuff.
Yeah, and so Assassin's right, dude. Maul fought and killed a Vong barehanded in Lockdown.
He sure the hell did.
Mm-hmm. So, and let's see here, and spoiler, it rips out the heart of a Wampa. And then I love Bounty Hunter game. So yeah,
that's a classic. That's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. So another quiz, the last quiz before we start wrapping things up. So I like to keep my show under 2 hours here. So who were the two Imperial Thrawn? Who were the two Imperials Thrawn was captured by during his exile?
Oh, one of them was I couldn't tell you his name. I remember the sequence of what happens. I remember that they're gonna kill Thrawn, but instead they decided to take him to the Emperor, and the Emperor, congratulate, because Thrawn had he had dealt with the Emperor before prior to his exile, and everyone was like, oh man, the Emperor's gonna kill him. He just brought back a man that was able to best the Emperor. And I remember that everyone was surprised when the Emperor congratulated him instead, but I could not tell you his name.
Okay, so there's two of them. The first one, they were together. Thrawn put up a good defense in his little home territory that he established when he was put into exile. Voss Park, it's Parck. And then
he's not the one I was thinking of, so I must have been thinking of the other one.
Yeah, and then Mosh Barris.
Yes. Okay, so that's who I was. That's the one whose name I couldn't have told you, but that's who I was remembering having the exchange with the Emperor.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the two that they were very intrigued and impressed by how he was able to defend and defeat, the intrusion, them intruding in on his home place there. So
he goes all guerrilla warfare on it. Like it's so, because that is one, I assume this is in a novel, but there's a comic book adaptation. That's what I read was the comic book adaptation. And that's where, if I read the novel, I'm sure it'll be cool there, but being able to see the art of how he did that was is
Mhm.
peak. As good comic book art right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and okay, so we're going to start wrapping this up. So, is there anything else you want to say about, your experience with Star Wars, the expanded universe, or to add on to anything?
No, you were showing off some books earlier. I got one more. So like, I also didn't love it near as much as the Ewoks show, but I loved droids. So I've got the Star Wars droids and Ewoks Legends
Yeah.
Compendium here. So
Yeah.
yeah. Animated Star Wars is. I feel like everyone loves Clone Wars, but there's so much more
Mhm.
animated Star Wars than just Clone Wars. You had the droids and Ewoks. You had the Genndy Tartakovsky series, which was incredible. I wish that got more love. And then you've got so many like fan edits of people like you used it in your intro, like people doing their own like anime versions of Star Wars. In fact, that's one of the few things Disney Plus did that I liked. I'm not going to watch season 2 because I'm done with Disney Star Wars, but season 1 of Star Wars Visions, doing Star Wars as an anime. And I think that most of those episodes really worked, specifically the episode of The Elder, which does take place in I think probably what Disney would consider like the High Republic era. I don't know. I could be wrong, but basically the Sith
Mhm.
are supposedly extinct, but there's one who's, for whatever reason, survives, and it shows what a Jedi Master and his Padawan have to do to overcome what they think is an extinct Sith user, and it's there are little nuggets of good in Disney
Mhm.
Star Wars, but the bad far outweighs it. I wish that we'd gotten more animated Star Wars before Disney took over, because the realm of what you can do in animation is so much more expansive than what they can do in live action, or even in books, since in books you've only got your own mental pictures to go off of. That it's such an unlimited environment when you've got animation, and it's a damn shame that we never got more before Disney.
Yeah, and George Lucas was experimenting with his first live action series, Underworld, which would have tied in with 1313, which was a game probably a lot of people were looking forward to, from what I've
Mm.
been
I
hearing
was for
and
sure.
watching it. Yeah, and I was going to ask you, you probably were,
Yeah,
because it was.
13 was looking fantastic, and
Mhm.
also, I mean, a lot of people until Disney, we didn't have a lot of information on the dark times of the Empire in between the two trilogies, and so when
Right.
you had something like the Force Unleashed that showed Galen Merrick and like how
Mhm.
he was effectively the reason the rebellion got started, which does contradict some stuff in the EU books and whatnot, but was still a very cool story in its own right. Like, there were not, nowadays it's very easy to find stories that show that Darth Vader hated Palpatine, but back then that was not nearly as common. So yeah, I just we lost a lot of really great work, and I'm surprised. We've been doing this almost 2 hours, didn't even touch on the Force Unleashed, but really I think that was a pivotal moment in Star Wars canon.
Yeah, yeah. And then Melissa Laura says, "I miss real Lucas Arts." Yeah, so
Me
they
too.
they had their stuff going on. Of course, Lucas Arts, was licensed out to help other film producers and stuff, and like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. They are credited for a lot more than just what George had them do in house. So
Right.
yeah, so very very the very awesome Lucas Arts and stuff, and they're still capable now. It's just that it doesn't, like I said, the heart isn't there anymore. The vision isn't there, the visionist, the heart isn't there anymore, and that's, you could definitely see that.
Well, and when I played what was that game, the Cal Kestis game, Star Wars Jedi. What,
Survivor.
not the newest one, but the first one. Was it Survivor, or is that the newest one?
I think the Survivor's the newest one, but yeah, Jedi Survivor, I don't remember. I don't
Yeah.
keep up to this
Or
guy's
yeah.
games
The
and
point
stuff.
is, like, I played that game, and it has moments where it feels like real Star Wars. It truly like there's no forced diversity. There's no pandering messages. It has a lot going for it. But because it's Disney Star Wars, you still see their fingerprints on certain things. You still
Mhm.
see
Very
like,
cool.
oh, Fallen Order. Thank you, Melissa. Fallen and Mr. Dystopian. Yeah, Fallen Order. Like,
Mhm.
near the end, when the bad Sith girl, of course she turns good before Darth Vader shows up, because once again, Disney can't have bad guys stay bad guys. They all need redemption arcs. It
Mhm.
dilutes things by like how Cal Kestis survives and has effectively almost completely severed himself from the Force. Like, I can believe that. Yeah, obviously there's obviously going to be a few survivors. Now, with Disney continuing to add them, it makes Order 66 looks pointless and dilutes the brand, dilutes the product. But like in a vacuum, it's easy to believe, okay, Cal survived as a child, and he is one of the only ones besides Obi-Wan and Yoda out there. Like one of the young adult books I read when I was in like 6th grade was an Obi-Wan book that took place in between the third and fourth films, and it was it had to do with this Jedi that he quit being a Jedi right before the Purge. His name was Ferris Olin. And so Obi-Wan tracks down Ferris Olin and is trying to bring him back to the fight. And like, I haven't read that book in ages. It's written for kids like 12 years old. That's around the age I was when I read it. But I remember really enjoying that book. So it's not really a new concept to occasionally see old surviving Jedi. Disney's sort of ruined it. But in a vacuum, Fallen Order works. It does almost feel like real Star Wars minus some problems near the end. And I want to love Star Wars video games again, but it's so tough because that was the one spot where it was holding out. The books may be non-canon and gone. The comics nowadays may be crap comics, but for a while Star Wars games were still the closest we had to original Star Wars, and even that's out the window now.
Yeah. And then I'm just going to add on to this. So that is the last, the tip off of The Last of the Jedi. And that was the first 2 installments of The Last of the Jedi Young Readers series and stuff. I do have the whole collection. And what was so amazing about this is that this happened probably, I'd say, shortly after Kenobi novel, which, and it still stayed in continuity with George wanting Obi-Wan to stay in exile. So it happened so close to him going in exile and realizing that Obi-Wan needed to make sure that all evidence of the twins' birth and Padme giving birth was, erased on Polis Massa. And that was one of his visions, along with Ferris Olin and stuff like that, and helping him out because it all links together, that he had to go take care of because he had to cover their tracks to protect the twins.
And I haven't read this book in probably 15 years, but there's one line that still sticks with me. I'm going to paraphrase a little because I remember the exact dialogue. But at one point, Ferris Olin says, Obi-Wan, if you're going to keep talking to me like a Jedi, this isn't going to work. And like it showed, this dude he's not a Jedi. He's not coming back. And to put that in a book for like a 12-year-old, like this hero is not your traditional hero, the Ferris Olin character. He doesn't want to be a Jedi. To put in a book for children, hey, being a Jedi isn't all that. Disney wouldn't have the balls today to do something like that. Yeah.
So we could sit here and talk forever, but maybe we'll have a part 2 or whatever. And,
but by then I'll have read that Hand of Thrawn duology.
Yeah, there you go. And we can follow up on all that. So you have homework. People know, especially Soul Assassin, that I like to say, okay, this is what's going on for Coffee Chat. You guys have homework. So, I always want to keep people on their toes. And I try to stay on my toes. And sometimes they keep me on my toes by correcting me and what have you, because we're human. We're not perfect. We forget, what have you. And that's what we're here to do, is to share what we love, remind each other of certain points and plots and things that we love, and expand our knowledge together. Star Wars is such a big universe of there's more than 200 novels that have been written. Comics is well into almost 1,000 if you want to, count everything that's been done since the inception of Star Wars and within the Marvel comics and all of that. So we're bound to forget something and all that. So, this is what this is about, is reminding, going over, rehashing, refreshing, or whatever you want to call it, the beautiful lore that was created by George Lucas and expanded by the writers he, brought in and gave them directives on how he wanted these stories to be done and said. May not be exactly to what maybe he may have written, but he gave them standards. He gave them rules. He approved of them so that they can fall according to what his vision is in some way, shape, or form. And this is what this is about. And Talking EU is about bringing you guys, the EU elitists, basically, if you haven't heard what that term is, we are EU elitists here, I guess you can say, and talking and discussing this and what made Star Wars significant to you. So thank you again, Leon, for joining in. If you want to share what's going on with your channel this coming week, for the rest of the week and into the next, go ahead.
So As far as my channel goes, it is kind of a mixed bag. I usually cover pop culture and nerdy news through a political lens. Now, that does not mean I have a political lean. I'm actually quite down the middle. I piss off individuals on both sides. If Democrats are doing something that messes with nerd culture, I'm going to call it out. If Republicans do it, I'm calling that out as well. More often than not, I'm calling out the left because the Republicans tend to stay out of nerd culture. But don't get me wrong, I'll throw some shade at Matt Walsh when it needs to be done. So, yes, if you want to see my takes on pop culture and nerd culture through a political lens, you can come to my channel. I also cover a lot of Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast news. My channel, Words of Paradise, is actually based off the Magic card Birds of Paradise. I started this with the idea of being a very anti-Wizards of the Coast channel, and if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering, you know how badly they're screwing up. But I don't want to always be a negative channel. I did a video that the reason I haven't posted in the last couple of days or haven't posted today, I did a video yesterday where I went to a Magic tournament. I interviewed a bunch of Magic players about their thoughts and opinions on Magic the Gathering crossovers and how they're getting excessive. Someone even brings up, wishing that there'd be a Star Wars crossover. So you've got that to look forward to. And so, yeah, if you're interested in anything nerdy, whether it be political or non-political, definitely come to my channel. I usually do videos about 10 to 20 minutes long. They don't usually get that long, but occasionally happens. I also like covering positive things and nerdy news. There really is positivity out there. Now, those videos don't do very well because YouTube thrives on negativity, but if you want to hear good news about an upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog game, if you want to hear good news about Wolverine's, traditional yellow outfit being in Deadpool 3, when the good news arrives, I'll cover it. It is not all negative. We don't have to always be negative on this platform, even if it results in lower views. We can talk about things that we love that are good while also criticizing the current state of nerd culture. So if that's the sort of thing you're into, by all means, check out my channel. And if you disagree with me, do that. That's A-okay. The whole world, we should thrive on disagreeing, but also being able to have the dialogue when we disagree. And that's something that, OG Star Wars here brought to my channel when she was on a couple of days ago, last week, when she was on the last episode of my live stream. So yeah, just tune in for two almost always daily, 2 nerdy news videos, and see if you learn something.
Awesome. And thank you so much for allowing me to be on your channel as well as coming here for Talking EU. So I have Jason Fox here for member of 5 months, member chat here. Hail OG Star Wars. And thank you so much again for everyone's support, whether you're a subscriber or member. Thank you so much for coming in and sitting with us and listening to us gab and talk and laugh and, and tease and stuff. That's what this is about, is nerding, sitting down and nerding out about what we love about Star Wars, is particularly the person I'm interviewing here. So thank you guys so much for coming in, and you guys have a good day, and may the Force be with you. Talk to you guys later.
Another happy landing.